Welcome to the Momnesia Podcast, a podcast for moms where we share the stories we want to remember and the ones we wish we could forget. We're your hosts, Julie Short and Sarah McLaughlin.
So excited that we're finally doing this.
Yes, our podcast is happening.
So we want this to be a place where we share the hilarious, the mundane, and even the heartbreaking stories of motherhood. We really want them to be told and cherished, and we want them to be preserved for those that are coming after us.
Exactly. And we hope that by sharing these stories and listening to one another, we're going to build connections between moms that will lead to a kinder and more compassionate world. So if we're going to tell stories, let's start by getting to know you, Sarah. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, okay. So I am a worship leader. And in fact, we are right now in the Grace Church podcast studio in Noblesville. And they were so generous to let us use their amazing equipment and room. So we're very grateful for that. But I'm a worship leader really around the country for different events. And I'm a songwriter and writer, and I'm a wife to my best friend, Jeff, for 17 years. And then I have these 5 kids that have come along. I keep trying to lose
How
them,
did
but
that happen?
they keep following me. Well, that's for the next podcast.
Okay.
So I have always been a believer and a hoper and dreamer to try to find sacred spaces in really ordinary things. I feel like even as a kid, I was thinking about serious things. So that has carried over into my life and career. So I'd say that's kind of a glimpse into my life. What about you?
Well, of course, I have to throw this in there. It's because you're a 4.
I know.
You are.
Enneagram alert.
Enneagram.
Hashtag.
You are the creative one for sure. Well, I am an 8, if we're going to start there. My name is Julie, and I have spent most of my professional career in the world of higher education. But I have always had this entrepreneurial spirit, and I always have these big ideas.
Yes, you do.
I do. I have lots of ideas, and this has been a fun way to start to explore some of those ideas. I am also married. My husband's name is Colin. We have been married 16 years. So we are just behind you and Jeff.
Next year is going to be awesome.
Yes. We have 2 kids, Mary Kate and Matthew, and a lot of our world surrounds the sports world. My husband is an athletic director, and we spend a lot of our time not only in high school sports, but also going to collegiate sports and professional sports. We love doing that as a family and traveling. So that's where you can usually find us, is at a sporting event or hanging out with our friends. We have a really close community of friends that we love doing life with together.
Good, cool.
So Sarah, why don't we talk about how we first met? We seem to have, the stars have aligned where our paths keep crossing. But do you remember the very first time we met?
Yes. And I'm cracking up because we have different memories of what that was.
Yes, we do.
But
we can both agree that it was at Anderson University,
yes,
correct?
It was. My first memory of you was that I was scared of you because you were this smart, efficient, commanding leader. You were my tutor for psychology. I can't remember exactly what class because I had a psych minor, but it was one of them.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, I'm a little intimidated.
I was in the psychology department a lot, but I do think it was for the general psych class, if I remember correctly. And I do tend to intimidate people. People tell me that a lot, but I promise that I am super nice.
Right,
and
right.
I am
Well, I know
not
that now.
meant to be intimidating. But I do like to get stuff done.
Yes, that's good. Is that your 8-ness?
That's my 8-ness.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but then we crossed paths again because of Mama Made.
Yes. So we were both having kids around the same time. And some of our friends from Anderson University were also having babies. And they pulled together this group on Facebook to just be a safe space for us to ask questions, to vet out different baby products, to talk about the struggles we were having in a really safe space. And we connected again there.
And of course, there's the big connection of why we're running in a similar orbit now.
Yes, we are related
Basically
through marriage.
family.
We're basically sisters. That's what we like to say. But my sister, Amy, is married to your husband's brother.
Yes.
So
Sisters once-ish removed.
once-ish removed. I love it.
Yes. So I came to you, though, most recently with regards to Momnesia. I came to you in March, and I was getting ready to drive to Texas, right at the edge of the map where my husband is from.
Oh.
And so our kids, how old are your kids?
Mine are 9 and 6.
Okay. So our kids are 10, 8, 6, and we have twins that are 3. And actually it went pretty well, but beforehand
How
I was
you
thinking,
survived that car trip, I will never know.
I remember one time we drove it. It did not go well. And I told Jeff, if we ever go back to visit your family, you will fly me there or I'm leaving you.
I remember that conversation. I remember
This time I thought, well, maybe headphones would help. So I was like, I think I'm going to put a post out on Facebook and see who's into podcasts. And not only do I need to figure out what podcasts, I don't even know how to get that thing on my phone. Like, is there a button? Is it through iTunes? And you not only chimed in, but it was like a text and a message and a recommendation. And this would be like choice 1, I think, for you.
You guys, I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
I am obsessed with podcasts. So to say having my own podcast is a dream come true is not an exaggeration in the least.
Right. And of course, I had one big caveat. I only wanted something funny. So naturally, you gave me 2 true crime podcasts. I think it was Serial and Up and Vanished.
Those are hilarious. They are not hilarious, just so you know.
Now, I will say, when I was listening to, I'm pretty sure this was Up and Vanished. I was listening to that heavy crime. It's like we're driving through the night. The kids are all asleep. I have my headphones in. Car is dark. I haven't talked to Jeff in years, basically, because of this podcast. And
Honey, I will talk to you when this is done.
Right. Who done it? Who done it? Who done it? And so we got to a hotel in the middle of the night. It had to be 2 or 3 in the morning. And Jeff's like, why don't you go ahead in and get the kids in and I'll get all the luggage and everything. And I went in there and I was like peeking behind everything. I was like paranoid and freaked out, but I was totally hooked. Like it totally wrapped me up in the world of podcasts. So
it's a gateway drug.
Yes, it is.
Serial
like
is the gateway.
Negative 12-step program. So then I was like, Julie, we should totally do this.
And oh my gosh, I was like, yes, let's do a podcast.
Yeah.
So we were just kind of brainstorming ideas and throwing out, okay, what would be some common topics that we could talk about and feel confident in talking about?
Yeah. And what do we have in common? Like
exactly.
It was pretty organic how it happened.
It really was. And we didn't go through too many ideas before Sarah threw out Momnesia. And I was hooked. I was like, that is it. This is our podcast. So Sarah, tell them how you came up with the idea of Momnesia.
Well, I'd used that term before, like with friends and I don't mean to throw my moms under the bus in episode 1, but
it's probably going to happen.
Here it is. One of the things that I see happening a lot as people progress in motherhood and age out of the system, age up, they tend to say, oh, sweetie, don't blink. It'll go so fast. Just enjoy it. But they'll also come with a bit of, I don't remember my kids ever doing that bad thing or hard thing And I always would say about grandmas, I would say, well, Gramnesia.
Gramnesia has set in.
Right. And I think it happens with moms too. So I kind of had that thought, that hook, if you will. I'm a songwriter. So that hook in mind for what, what could I use that for? What kind of project? And so then when we were talking podcast and curating stories, it was like, oh, that is synergy right there. I think
that is it.
Yep.
And you not only had the name Momnesia, but you also had the tagline like right there, ready to go. So tell them about the tagline.
Yes. Momnesia, the stories we want to remember and the ones that we wish we could forget.
And that's going to be the format of our show.
Right.
This is going to be a podcast where we are curating stories. So in order to do that, you guys are probably going to get sick of just hearing our stories all the time. So we want to bring on moms that we know and love and that are great storytellers that people will be able to relate to and laugh with and cry with. And they will come on and tell a story from each of those categories, a story that they want to remember and one they wish they could forget.
And let me add, each of these women, when we first came up with our list, we kind of tried to narrow down because we actually know so many extraordinary
awesome
women.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, you'll see this as the episodes come out. I don't want to give it all away, but they represent a lot of different facets, whether it be a loss or whether it be adoption or parts of motherhood, different walks. And one thing we've talked about is we don't want this community to be a source of advice, but just a source of experience, really. So not only did they come from different angles of their motherhood, but they also, all of them have either a side hustle or some cause or something that they tend to champion or they're researched on or they can really speak to. So I think that'll be super cool.
Yes, definitely. So for today, for our inaugural podcast, we want to give you a glimpse of what this format's going to look like. I'm going to share a story that I want to remember, and Sarah is going to share a story she wishes she could forget.
Yep.
So I'll get us started. Is that okay with you, Sarah?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I'm eager to hear this.
Yes. So before I totally head into my story, I have to give you a little bit of background.
Okay.
So I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and in the 80s, I don't know if I could research this and verify it. Maybe we'll do that in the show notes. But there were like a string of kidnappings that were taking place in Phoenix.
Okay.
And I was terrified. Oh. I mean, this was like on the news all the time, and not like I was reading the news as a kid.
Right.
But
with
like,
your coffee.
Exactly. My coffee. But police officers came to our door and knocked on it and had sketches of men. Make sure your children are not near here, and talking about stranger danger. And they had these like helping hands on the windows so that if you were walking to school and something was happening, you knew a house that you could run to and be safe.
Okay. Yeah, that's really unsettling.
So this was like a really strong influence in my formative years. And so I was like you, heading into the hotel rooms, peeking behind every door and window. I am terrified of being at home alone, even as an adult. I don't remember
that here.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a big thing for me. So even in my adult life, Colin, my husband, if he were traveling for work, which he did quite a bit, I would be like, keep your phone by your head. If something happens, I'm going to call you and you need to immediately call the police. And, I'm going to call you first.
Okay.
So
before the police, you're going to call him.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It made sense to me because I thought I would, maybe it's not really happening.
Right. Okay.
Maybe it is my imagination, but he could kind of talk me through it if I had to go out into the house and look around.
Right.
So that was a common theme in our marriage.
And did you ever have to have a drill on this where you practiced? And was he actually responsive?
Oh, I don't know if I would call it a drill, but I did call often. And he did not always answer. And so there was always a firm talking to.
Okay.
I called you and you did not answer. What if someone was trying to kill me?
So this is grandma's, mother's, and husband's under the bus, episode 1.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. We won't do that for every episode. So like I said, so that's kind of the setup for this next story.
Okay.
So, Colin and I had been married for 5 years, and we decided that we wanted to start trying to have children.
Okay.
And we hadn't had a history of infertility in our family. And so I think I went into it like most people do, like, I'm going to stop birth control and next week I will be pregnant.
Okay.
And that was not the case for us.
All right.
We pulled the goalie, which is what I would call not being on birth control. And for that first year, we were trying to have a kid and it just wasn't happening.
Okay.
So for the next year, I decided to be a little bit more strategic about it, doing some of that natural family planning and charting and taking basal body temperatures in the morning. And still, we were not able to get pregnant.
Okay, wow.
So I was a little nervous about, at that time, I did know quite a few friends that were using Clomid, having multiples, and I was a little bit nervous about that. So I decided I wanted to go see a naturopath first to see if maybe there's just something not quite working right, and if there's something that we could find out as the cause of the problem first, treat that, and then keep going on our journey.
Can I interject for a second?
Yes.
The thought of a naturopath today, for me at least, that's like, okay, we talk about that. That's a thing. But Mary Kate's 9, so you were 10 plus years doing that. That seems like you were ahead of the curve. Was this a really new idea for you to go that route? Did somebody tell you, or you already kind of were into natural things and organic things? And like, how did that cross your mind to look into that?
I have always tried to take good care of my body, and
obviously,
but I also am not someone who likes to just immediately medicate if there are other ways to go about doing things. And so I had just kind of started reading that. I had a friend in my life who was pretty influential in those types of conversations.
Okay.
And, gave me some good stuff to read. So that was kind of what was going on in my thought process at the time. Like, are there ways that I can do this without having to use in vitro and Clomid? And I knew that might be in my future, but I thought, okay, let's kind of rule out some of these other things first.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I worked with this doctor for about a year and we weren't getting anywhere.
Okay.
And he said, okay, you know what? We're going to take a few weeks break. I mean, I was seeing him almost weekly, bi-weekly, just trying to talk through things. He was great. I loved him. His name is Dr. Wozni, and he's in Phoenix. And was really able to help me kind of talk through some things. And we tried a few different things that didn't work. But he said, let's take a break. I feel like we need to just take some time to think about what the next steps are going to be. And so we did. And during that time, I did some reading and I decided I wanted to ask him about acupuncture.
Okay.
And I came back into the office, and the very first thing he said, before I said anything, he's like, hey, I wanted to talk to you. One thing that we didn't try last time that I think could be a good fit is acupuncture. And I was like, yes, that's what I was going to say.
Yes.
And he's like, I can't really explain how it works. He's like, but the theory behind it is that there is energy that's running through your body in different channels, the yin and the yang. And sometimes that energy, which is called qi, can be blocked. And so what these needles do is they stimulate that particular area that might be blocked to allow the energy to start flowing.
Okay.
Yes. So I was like, okay, well, whatever, let's try it.
Right.
So we did that for the first week. We're going to do 3 weeks of it. So the first week, I'm just laying there, got these needles in. You can't really tell anything.
Yikes. Okay.
Come back the next week. I hadn't started my period. And he's like, okay, well, let's take a pregnancy test. And we took it. It was negative. He's like, okay,
all right.
Well, I'm going to be careful in where I put them this time. Just in the off case that you are pregnant. I'm like, okay. Come back next week. I still haven't started.
All right.
And I was scheduled. He also wanted to get on the books a ultrasound, an internal ultrasound, to see if maybe endometriosis was going on.
All right.
So I tell him I still haven't started. He says, go get a pregnancy test, take the pregnancy test, and do not go and get this ultrasound.
All right.
So we canceled the ultrasound. I went and got a pregnancy test, and I already had the day off because of this ultrasound and this appointment. So Colin had left for work for the day, and I was at home. We had just moved into a new house, and so we were still like unpacking boxes and getting the cable set up. And at that time, people still had landlines, so we were working on getting phone.
All
yes. Right. And so Colin and I had been calling back and forth trying to set up these appointments. Mm-hmm. And I decided after he left, I took the pregnancy test, and I can't tell you, man, after so many negatives,
yes,
finally seeing a positive, like the joy and like relief and the like so many emotions all at once.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm immediately crying. I'm immediately screaming at the top of my lungs. I'm running around the house, praising God, saying, I just cannot believe.
Right.
That
finally
that this has happened.
Yes.
And like I said, I just cannot believe it. So I'm getting ready to jump in the shower, and I am just still crying, and I am looking in the mirror, and I'm like, holding my stomach, and I'm like, I love you, baby.
Right.
And I'm just screaming with joy.
Oh my gosh.
And I jump in the shower, and I just I'm bawling and just crying and screaming.
Yes.
I'm overwhelmed with emotion. Well, I get out, and my phone was on the counter in there, and I notice I have 6 missed phone calls from Colin, which is highly unusual because he's at work.
We just covered that.
We just, we had been talking already about the cable. And I try to call him, and I'm trying to like calm myself down because I don't want him to I don't want to tell him over the phone that I'm pregnant. Like I'm already starting to plan out how I'm going to tell him. I'm going to take him out to dinner. It's going to be this great moment in our marriage. And I call, and it immediately goes to voicemail. And so I shoot him a quick text. Right. We are texting at this point in history, just so you know. And I said, hey, babe, saw I missed your call. Did you need something? Less than 5 seconds later, he's calling. And I'm like, hey, what's up? And he is like, what is going on? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I've been trying to call you. Why were you answering? And I was like, I was in the shower. And
you're like, huh?
Yeah, this is so not Colin. Colin does not, he's not a yeller. If he can't get a hold of me, then he's not all that concerned.
Right.
But he's like, what is going on? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
What's going on with you, dude?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he goes, I heard you screaming and yelling, I love you, baby. I immediately freeze. Yeah. And I start looking around the house, and I'm like, does this new house have a security camera that I don't know about? Am I being watched? How does he know this? And I'm like, I just kind of sit there. He's like, Julie, if you don't start talking right now. And I'm like, okay, how do you know that? He's like, you called me And I can hear you screaming in the background. He's like, I'm on the phone with the police. They are sending people over right now. And if you don't tell me what is going on.
Right.
So I'm like, oh my goodness.
Right.
All those years of me yelling at him that I'm going to call when something horrible happens is now taking a very nasty turn.
Right.
So I am trying to calm him out. I'm like, hey, I'm okay. You don't need to call the police. Everything's all right. I'm like, but I don't want to tell you what's going on. And he's like, oh no, you're going to tell me what's going on. You're going to tell me right now.
Mr. Responsive now.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, I don't really want to tell you. He's like, I don't care what you want.
Right.
Tell me.
Right.
I'm like, okay. Well, keep in mind that this is not how I wanted to tell you, but I'm pregnant. And he is just silent. And he's like, what? I'm like, I'm pregnant. I was yelling because I'm very excited, and I was screaming, I love you, baby, because I love our baby, and I'm very excited.
Oh my gosh.
So it was quite the pregnancy announcement for us the first time around. So it feels good to have a story like that is filled with joy and excitement and kind of
a little
suspense.
bit of crazy.
It's a little bit of crazy after 3 years of trying. And I realize in the grand scheme of things that trying for 3 years for people who experience infertility is like a drop in the bucket.
Sure.
But when you are going through that, it does feel like an eternity. And you just, if I hear one more person is pregnant, I'm going to lose my mind.
Right.
And so my heart goes out to all those moms and want to be moms who are trying so desperately to get pregnant. I hope that there's joy at the end of your story as well.
Yeah.
So that was how I was able to tell Colin that I'm pregnant.
Great story.
It's one of my favorites. One of my favorites to tell. And it's definitely one I want to remember.
Yes. That's amazing.
So tell us a story that you wish you could forget.
All right. When I think about forgetting this story, I have to put the obvious, like, I'm not going to actually never remember this. I'm going to remember it, but I want to forget the sting of it. I want to have some other pieces that are a part of it besides just the pain of it.
Right.
So my story is one that I have to say I'm hesitant to share sometimes because it's like you said, you hope for the moms and moms to be, there's joy at the end of their story. And there is joy at the end of this story. I have 2 healthy twins to prove that came at the end of this particular story. So I have slight hesitation because of the good outcome, and I fear it will be painful. I know everyone's experience isn't this. And also, I don't want to diminish that I felt a higher power. Like I felt God's presence, and I believe regardless of the outcome, that's possible. But that's not my story. This is my story. So, we have twins that are identical twins that are 3, Jane and Willow. And
I love those names, by the way.
Thank you. There are grandmothers.
Yes.
They're Jane Marion and Willow Nell for Wilma and Nelda. Did not go for Wilma and Nelda, but
I do love those though. we both named our kids after grandmothers. Mary Kate.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
is named after Mary Dean and Catherine.
Cool. I love that. So back to my story. Just kidding. So, finding out we were expecting the twins was crazy and cool and a little scary. This would be a story for another time, but at the time Joseph was 5 and he was the one that said, God's bringing a baby. And we're like, well, crap, we just gave the crib away and probably not, bud.
Ooh, I do want to hear that story though.
Yeah. So he had a sense, and we had actually been talking about adopting. Who knows if we'll still do that someday, but Joseph said, God's going to bring a baby for Christmas. And so I thought, I think there might be something to that. Waited till I could take a test, and thank the Lord, we were. So we told the kids at Christmas time, and Joseph said, oh no, that's not it. There are going to be 2.
What?
Yeah.
How am I just hearing this story?
Gosh. So we were like, what? But down deep, I told my small group, I told my mom, and I told 2 other friends that I had run into that I just was like, I just have this sense about it. But I was really worried because I felt like then the kids were convinced, because Joseph kept saying it, like they would, if we would pray for the baby, he would say they, stuff like that. So we went to our first ultrasound, and I was feeling sad that it probably wasn't going to be twins.
Right.
And they had been convinced, and somewhere in me, like I wanted it then. So I was crying on the way to the ultrasound thinking it's going to kind of be a letdown to come tell them. And sure enough, it was twins. So it was awesome. It was amazing. Being that I was 37. Yeah. 37.
37, having twins. Here we go.
Now, identical twins, I could talk about twin stuff a lot. I won't, but identical twins, it's not age-related, fertility, drug or anything related, or there's not like an ethnic, racial piece that, like a lot of different types of twins, those things can play a part into the frequency. But identical, they kind of say, is like this fluke they don't understand yet. So, being that I was of advanced maternal age, as they reminded me all the time. High risk, and then the type of twins, because there are, within the types of twins, there are multiple different, subtypes. So of identicals, there are different types, and we had monodi twins, for those of you twin mamas out there, and it was higher risk because they share a placenta, and one can take nutrients from the other. So combine that with my advanced age, Rip Van Winkle, it was like just high risk. I was at the hospital all the time, 3 times a week, and a vitamin regimen and an eating regimen. It's just totally different than my other pregnancies. And I tend towards anxiety and worry, and I was anxious and worried a lot of the pregnancy. It was such again, let me just say, they're healthy and it's good. And I look back and I wish I could have been a little different, but I was so aware of numbers and charts and how sterile the environment felt to be tested all the time for things that I was worried a lot. There are some other things I don't even need to go into, but they told us along the way that we were watching that gave us a lot of fear. Or I say, I let myself choose fear, I guess.
Right.
But
which is understandable.
Yeah.
It's understandable that you would feel that way.
It was physiological reaction. So I let it on the bus, and I let it kind of ride with me for a lot of that time, though. Mm-hmm. So when the twins were born, it was such a remarkable, they came at 35 weeks and 2 days. They were 5'2" and 5'10", which
that is big for twins. Yeah.
For that early, 5 weeks early. And they were very close in size, which was such a blessing because of all I can't even remember the name of it, TTS or TTTS, some kind of twin transfusion, that they were pretty equal in size. We were at the hospital. Actually, I'll apologize to any male listeners, but I had a vaginal birth. Vaginal.
You don't need to apologize to our male listeners. You're right. We have very sophisticated male listeners.
They're really into vaginal things.
They are.
So in the 17 years that there were a couple nurses in the room that had been there, 115 and 117, there's 15 people in the room because we had all these backup just in case doctors and nurses. They'd only seen identical twins come vaginally for both one other time.
Wow.
So it was such a great blessing. And we were I felt this, okay, we went through all that high risk stuff and was feeling kind of relaxed. Well,
you made it to the finish line.
Well, fast forward, we had some NICU stuff and just adjusting to, I am already, I love nursing and I love going to the classes and reading about it. And was very committed to doing it, but it was.
So when you say nursing, you mean breastfeeding?
Breastfeeding, yes.
I thought you were talking about you love the profession.
I love
nurse.
Right.
Sorry.
The white hat, the white shoes.
Okay. I'm back on track.
I was very committed, but man, it was so hard. We had one baby on the NICU floor and we had a baby in our room.
So you couldn't even double football.
No. And, even if I could, they were too premature. Their muscle, what did they call it? Muscular skeletal culture. I don't know what, was not,
developed,
formed enough, and they were too sleepy and all this stuff. So it was definitely hard. I just finished nursing them on their third birthday. So clearly I stuck with it. I think maybe longer than I even should have, but it was such a labor of love early on that I had a really hard time parting at the end. So I'm getting a little off track here, but, when we finally got to go home and have our older 3 kids meet the twins, they would have been 3, 5, and 7 at that point. We got
For those of you who don't know, in the NICU, other children are not allowed in.
Yeah.
So if both my kids were NICU babies too. So the siblings are not allowed back there.
Right.
How long were the twins in the NICU?
Well, Jane was never in the NICU and Willow was only there for 4 days. So it wasn't really very long. And when we left the hospital, Jane was 5'2" or 5'3", and Willow was 4.5 pounds. So small, and all my other babies are 8 pounds something, 9 pounds. You've had big babies. Yeah. So it's they're coming out ready to get a job. And then these little twins
come out walking
so little. And, so we had to have a weigh-in, at a nearby pediatric office the next day. The next day. So when we came home, our kids weren't there. My sweet in-laws had the kid. Everyone, all hands on deck. They brought our kids home the next day. They met them. An hour later, we went to the weigh-in and everything changed. Willow, her temperature wouldn't stay up. And, we were trying the skin to skin, try to bond, try to get the warmth, try to get her temperature up. And it just wasn't happening. And so eventually, after about 5 different tries of temperature taking, different thermometers, I didn't even know temperature was a thing we were really still looking for. They said, we're not even going to call an ambulance. We want you to go straight to the hospital right now. We don't want you to stop by home. And you just need to get there.
How scary.
It was scary. And
why didn't they call the ambulance? I feel like that would be a quicker way, or they just didn't want to wait for an ambulance to get there.
Looking back, it was so fast. I don't know if they were concerned. It was not quite serious enough to need the ambulance, or if it was a time issue or what. But we did not go by our house. We went, again with the NICU, not only can other kids not come in, but they call them dirty babies once they've left. So we couldn't go back to the NICU. We were then admitted to the children's unit, to the pediatric unit, where we got there. We had these, we're 4 or 5 days out of having them.
Exhausted.
And they're only eating on tubes, and then I'm pumping, and then it's just we're just exhausted. And when we walk in, they don't even ask for our name. They just, they put us in a room, and Julie, it's within 3 or 4 minutes, they were hooking Willow up to all this stuff. When we just were like, we don't even know what's happening here. And
so the pediatrician had called ahead.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess they saw us and saw the twins and were like, boom, we got to go. We got to do something with this little baby. So what we were finding out within is it neonatologist? She's coming in. It's like starting the evening shift at this point, and she isn't really saying anything. She's just studying Willow. She's just studying the baby. And then they're saying, we got to get an IV in her. Do you want to be with her? And I'm like, yeah, but no, you just do it, bring her back. So within about an hour, they're putting all these antibiotics in her. I could be off on the time, but I mean, it was right after we got there. And the first time we realized the gravity of it was when the neonatologist finally said, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and we are afraid that because her temperature will not stay up, we are afraid she has an infection and that could kill her. And it went from like a couple hours before home, and we took a picture that's still framed huge in my house, this happy homecoming to terror.
She's not going to live.
Right. And
wow, Sarah.
What's amazing about this is, well, spoiler alert, she's fine. I mean, she's healthy, and thank God for that and his kindness. But we had, well, okay, I'll just back up to where I was. So, we're getting there, and the tricky thing about a peds unit also with twins is that one is officially admitted and the other isn't really allowed to be there. So there was no bed for Jane. There was no bed for us. I mean, there was a chair and a little couch thing, and we're going, well, I certainly can't stay here without you, Jeff. And I don't want to go home and leave the baby. It was very confusing. And so because I was nursing, they said, we will allow you to keep Jane here because she's dependent on you right now, and just keep her in the corner because of germs. So I was nervous about that.
Oh, yes.
And so what we knew was we have nothing with us, and we're going to need to go home and get something for Jane to sleep in, and clothes for us, and contacts, and our bite splints, and all this crap that I guess we're staying here. What we found out was they were going to take a culture, to see if there was infection. Mm-hmm. And it was going to take, we're going to be there at least 3 days. But the first 24 hours would be the first indication that the white blood counts were at a certain level where we could kind of relax a little bit and go, mm-hmm. okay, there's no major meningitis or something.
Right.
But 24 hours of basically listening to every beep.
Yes.
And just going, what is happening? And also, she'd been inside of me for 35 weeks with a twin, and they were each alone in their beds. And I had to pray a lot that God himself would be the twin for each of those babies and be the mother, be that she couldn't be held. And it was hard. So in that moment, what is crazy, and I guess this is a mix of wanting to forget and wanting to remember the amazing parts, but I don't know how my parents and my parents-in-law will feel about me saying this. I've never quite verbalized it, but we did not tell them what was going on. We did not tell them. We told them where we were. We told them what we needed, and they were right there to do everything we needed with our other kids. It was the first week of school for the kids, so it was kind of crazy. But we didn't tell them the extent of what the doctors had told us.
Situation.
I honestly didn't know if I could handle them knowing it too. I think was a lot of it. It was just so heavy, and we needed them to be there for other kids too. So I was faced with this reality of Jeff is going to need to go home and get all this stuff, and he's going to have to leave me here alone to figure this out. And at that time, like even 2 hours without him felt like the most insurmountable thing I was being told I had to do. Like I didn't even know how to hold the baby and feed them without his help. And I just couldn't do it. And so I'm thinking, who do we call? Because no one can get back here. Am I going to walk out to the lobby? Like I didn't even know what to do. And what's crazy is we had texted our small group, which if you're not a small group person, like, our friends from church that we met with every week and we talked spiritual things over with them, we had texted them and said, here's what's going on. And we did tell them, like, it's serious. We don't know if it's real yet, what they're saying, but this is what they think might be going on. And it's very scary. We don't need anything. We don't want anybody here, anything. Well, our small group leaders who are kind of the next season, they have kids, grandkids. This is crazy. They happened to be driving by the hospital, our hospital, Community North, as they got the text.
Oh my goodness.
And the wife said to her husband, Dave, pull over. We're going. And he said, well, they said they didn't want anyone. And she said, then they can tell us to leave. Of course, we didn't know this was going on. They didn't text us. We just are sitting there and I'm going, you have to go home, Jeff. And I am terrified that you're going to leave, but I don't feel right now I can even call anybody, and you just have to get home. And in the outline of the glass door, nobody stopped them. The doors are locked. We don't know how they got back there, is the outline of our small group leaders. And they came in and they just showed up.
Yeah.
And so the husband took Jeff home. He drove Jeff home, and the wife sat with me. And she was able to hear me say, I'm afraid that the rest of my kids are going to have to go visit her grave. Things that I couldn't voice to my parents. I didn't want to voice that to my parents, but I could say the worst thoughts possible are going through my mind. And she could comfort me and still be practical and bring me Wendy's and sit there with me and shed a tear with me and everything. And, the husband dug through the crap in my house of us having a baby when we didn't know we were going to have 2 babies, when we didn't know we were going to have them, and dig from my bite splint in my dirty bathroom. And so it was I think we were there for 4 more days, and we were cleared, and we were hardly out of the woods because there was still a lot of bilirubin this and tubes this and keeping temperatures up this. It was painful, but looking back at the ways that I can see a providential presence and people literally showing up in our room with the exact need being met that we needed. And, I have to believe that I forget that as all pain. I forget that as all confusion and terror, because I also see some other things that are worked into it and a part of it and even redemptive. And again, I just have to say, like, there are other hard things we've walked through. The outcome hasn't been like this, but we experienced the Lord's sweet kindness that they were able to walk away healthy. So yeah, that's my story.
That is a tough story. Mm-hmm. And what a gift it is to have people in our life that show up.
Oh my word. Yeah.
I mean, that woman who's your small group leader, you said she was a grandma, correct? Mm-hmm. So she knows what it's like to be a mom. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we don't even know how to express our own need or what we need at the time, but another mom who has been there, and not in that exact same situation, but she knows what it's like to be a newborn mom and kind of says, I don't care what you think you need. I'm going to show up anyway.
Right.
And if you don't need me, fine, but I'm going to show up because that's what's important.
True community
Yes.
is. And it was everything. It was everything. And, our families showed up in so many ways and other ways for us, and just what we needed also. Like we needed them so badly to be present with our other kids for so long after that point. I mean, they were an amazing village those next weeks while we figured out the most beautiful chaos we could ever imagine. So, yeah.
I'm glad that those people were there to surround you and show up during that time.
Yeah.
It helps us get through to the end.
Yeah.
To see the other side.
It does.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that story. Some of the things, like you said, you've never even shared verbally with other people. And I hope that that's what this podcast can be, a place where we can share stories in a safe space and learn to better understand each other. So thank you so much for that gift.
Yeah, thank you for receiving it. And thank you all for listening and joining in and just moving forward with sharing your own stories.
We hope that you will come back to hear from other moms that will be joining us over the next few weeks. We also invite you to connect with us on social media. We have a Facebook group and an Instagram account that we will be sharing stories there as well. And we would love to hear from you. So please let us know how things are going on in your family and in your world, and how we can connect with you. Thanks so much for joining us, and come back next week on the Momnesia Podcast, where we're going to share stories before Momnesia sets in and we forget it all.
Today's episode of Momnesia was recorded at Grace Church in Noblesville, Indiana, with original music by Phil Larson. Make sure to check out Grace's podcast Between Sundays and Phil's music at Spotify or iTunes.